Rain fell in soft curtains over Charleston, draping the city in a silver veil that blurred the edges of reality. Cobblestones gleamed like polished obsidian under Emily Carter's worn sneakers as she hurried toward Thompson's rare books, her canvas bag slung across her shoulder. The air smelled of wet earth and magnolia blossoms, a fleeting perfume that clung to the morning. At 27, Emily moved through the world like a shadow, present but unnoticed, her chestnut hair tucked beneath a faded scarf, her hazel eyes catching details others missed. A sparrow bathing in a gutter, a child's lost mitten pinned to a lamppost, a glint of light winking from a puddle at the corner of Meeting and Broad. She stopped, heart quickening. The four corners of law stood sentinel around her. City Hall, the courthouse, the post office, and St. Michael's Church, their brick facades softened by the drizzle. In the puddle, half submerged, lay a bracelet, its diamonds scattering prisms through the rain. Emily knelt, breath catching at its weight as she lifted it. Platinum links, cool and heavy, cradled stones that seemed to pulse with captured starlight. This was no trinket. It was a treasure, worth more than her apartment, her savings, her entire life stitched together. Common sense demanded she turn it over to the police, file a report, step away. But her mother's voice, soft as the rain itself, echoed in her mind. Sometimes the heart knows faster than the head. Ellen Carter, gone 3 years now, had been a nurse who paid strangers' bills, left groceries on doorsteps, sent unsigned cards to the lonely. She taught Emily that the most beautiful acts needed no audience. This bracelet belonged to someone searching, someone whose heart might break without it. Emily wrapped it in her handkerchief, its intricate craftsmanship a whisper of permanence in her calloused hands. 6 blocks away, James Harper stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corporate tower, the harbor glittering below like a promise he could no longer keep. At 34, he was the self-made CEO of Harper Grace, a luxury jewelry empire born in his college dorm and now employing hundreds. Success had forged invisible chains. His fiancée, Victoria Lane, orchestrated his life with the precision of a symphony conductor. Every meal photographed, every smile calibrated for her 2.3 million Instagram followers. This morning, her voice sliced through the penthouse's sterile silence. "You lost the Aurora bracelet?" Victoria's emerald eyes flashed, her manicured hands gripping a tablet displaying their engagement shoot schedule. "James, that piece was custom. $35,000 of diamonds and platinum, designed to catch light for the Charleston-style cover." "Do you understand what this does to our timeline?" James ran a hand through his dark hair, exhaustion etching lines around his blue eyes. "I will find another bracelet, Victoria." "You do not understand." Her voice cracked, betraying the strain beneath her polished facade. "The rose gold matches my spring collection. The diamonds are conflict-free for my environmental campaign. This is our brand story." James turned away, staring at the city below. The bracelet was not a symbol of love, but a prop in a performance, chosen for its photogenic sheen rather than its meaning. He wondered when he had stopped feeling the weight of his own heart, micromanaged into silence by a life he no longer recognized. Back at Thompson's rare books, Emily slipped through the weathered door, the brass bell chiming to an audience of dusty tomes. The store smelled of aged paper and polished wood, its shelves a labyrinth of stories waiting to be claimed. She set her bag down, the bracelet hidden inside, and began sorting a shipment of poetry collections, her fingers tracing spines with reverence. Her mother had loved this place, reading to Emily between shifts at the hospital, teaching her that books, like kindness, could heal what the world broke. That evening, alone in her apartment above the store, Emily researched the bracelet. Her laptop glowed with images from Harper Grace's website, confirming its origin. The boutiques whirled, Sleek, exclusive, untouchable, felt like a parallel universe to her own, where rent was paid in stories and customers counted quarters for first editions. She opened her mother's fountain pen, its ink a bridge to Ellen's memory, and wrote on cream stationery. Found near Meeting and Broad. I hope this finds its way back to someone who loves it. Sometimes beautiful things get lost so they can be found by the right hands at the right moment. She pressed a dried violet between the pages, her mother's signature touch, humility in every petal. Sealing the envelope with wax from her grandmother's candle, Emily felt the act complete itself, a quiet offering to the universe. The next morning, before the boutique opened, she left the package with a security guard, giving no name, asking no reward. The rain had stopped, and Charleston sparkled as if washed clean, unaware of the spark Emily had just ignited. Across town, James sat in his office, the returned bracelet glinting on his desk, the violet pressed beside it like a secret too fragile to speak. The note's handwriting was elegant, unhurried, personal. The paper smelled faintly of lavender and old books. In a world of calculated exchanges, this act, selfless, anonymous, felt like a miracle. Who returned $35,000 without seeking credit? Who believed in kindness without an audience? He stood, resolve hardening. He would find her, this stranger who had restored his faith in something he thought lost forever. Outside, Charleston's ancient oaks whispered, their Spanish moss swaying like veils over a city where two hearts, separated by worlds, were about to collide. James Harper stood in his office, the Aurora bracelet glinting under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, its diamonds casting fractured rainbows across the anonymous note. The pressed violet, delicate as a whispered promise, seemed to hum with intent. He traced the handwritten words. Sometimes beautiful things get lost, so they can be found by the right hands, and felt a pang, sharp and unfamiliar, in his chest. In his world of contracts and calculated gestures, this act of pure kindness was a foreign language, one he desperately wanted to learn. He tucked the note into his jacket, the violet cradled in its folds, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. He would find the person who wrote it. Charleston's midday sun burned through the morning's rain, painting King Street in golden hues. James navigated the historic corridor, past boutiques with curated windows and cafes spilling laughter onto sidewalks. His polished loafers clicked against cobblestones, a rhythm out of sync with the city's leisurely pulse. He showed the bracelet's photo to shopkeepers, describing a stranger who returned $35,000 without a name. Most shrugged, their eyes glazing with disinterest. A jeweler on Broad Street suggested Harper Grace's own security footage, but the guard had only a vague description. A woman, young, unremarkable, vanishing into the dawn. By late afternoon, James stood before Thompson's Rare Books, its faded sign a quiet rebellion against the street's polished facades. The brass bell chimed as he entered, stirring air thick with the scent of aged leather and ink. Shelves towered like ancient sentinels, their volumes whispering stories of forgotten lives. Emily Carter looked up from a stack of poetry collections, her hazel eyes catching the sunlight that slanted through windows older than the nation. She wore a simple sweater, her chestnut hair loose, framing a face that held both gentleness and guarded sorrow. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft but steady, as if greeting a friend rather than a stranger. "Looking for something specific?" James hesitated, the bracelet's photo burning a hole in his pocket. "I am searching for someone who might have found a bracelet yesterday near Meeting and Broad." "Something valuable." They returned it without leaving a name. Emily's fingers paused on a worn copy of Rilke, her heart stuttering. She kept her gaze on the book, arranging it with care. "That is wonderful that you are looking for them. Most people would replace something like that and move on." Her composure was a shield, but James caught the flicker in her eyes, a spark of recognition she quickly buried. "They gave it back," he said, studying her.
No name, no contact, no reward. Why would someone do that in a world like ours? Emily considered her words, her mother's lessons weaving through her thoughts. Maybe they believe some things cannot be replaced. Maybe they know that actions without praise carry their own reward. Her voice was quiet, but it landed like a stone in still water, rippling through James's carefully guarded defenses. Before he could respond, an older man emerged from the back room, his silver hair catching the light. Mr. Thompson, 67, carried the quiet authority of someone who had loved deeply and lost profoundly. His wife, Clara, had died 15 years ago, leaving him to tend this bookstore like a garden of memories. He watched Emily with a father's pride, seeing in her the same tenderness he once had before the world taught him to shout to be heard. "Everything all right, Emily?" Mr. Thompson asked, his eyes flicking to James with gentle scrutiny. "Yes, Mr. Thompson," she replied, offering a small smile. "This gentleman is looking for someone who did a kind thing." Mr. Thompson nodded, his weathered hands adjusting his glasses.
Kindness without a signature is rare these days. Whoever they are, they understand what matters. James felt the weight of their words, a contrast to Victoria's world of metrics and exposure. He wanted to stay, to ask more, but his phone buzzed, Victoria's name flashing like a warning. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than intended. "I will keep looking." As he left, the bell's chime echoed, a note of possibility lingering in the air. Back at the bookstore, Emily exhaled, her hands trembling as she resumed sorting books. The encounter had stirred something she thought buried, hope, fragile and dangerous. She moved to the back room where Mr. Thompson was cataloging a first edition. "He seemed lost," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just looking for a bracelet, but for something else." Mr. Thompson set down his pen, his eyes kind but piercing. "Your mother used to say people find what they need when they stop looking for what they want. That man's searching for more than jewelry, Emily. And you are carrying Ellen's light, whether you see it or not." Emily's throat tightened. Ellen Carter's death had left a void no amount of anonymous kindness could fill. Yet her mother's legacy, letters to strangers, groceries for the desperate, cards for the forgotten, lived in Emily's every act. She wrote notes to lonely faces she saw in coffee shops, to moments that deserved witness, signing them only with pressed flowers, violets for humility, baby's breath for love. The bracelet's return was one such act, but James's search felt like a thread pulling at the fabric of her quiet life. That evening, James sat in his penthouse, the city's lights sprawling below like a map of his achievements. Victoria was at a charity event, her absence a rare reprieve. He held the violet note, its lavender scent faint but persistent. The handwriting haunted him, elegant and deliberate, like a voice he had heard in a dream. His life with Victoria was a performance, every gesture staged, every emotion optimized for likes. But this note, this act, was real. It demanded nothing, yet gave everything. He opened his laptop, searching Charleston's bookstores, landing on Thompson's rare books. The website was simple, its about page mentioning Emily Carter, a clerk with a passion for poetry, and Mr. Thompson, a widower preserving his wife's love of stories. No mention of anonymous kindness, yet James felt a certainty settling in his bones. The woman in the bookstore, with her steady hands and quiet wisdom, was connected to this note. He did not know how, but he would return. Across town, Emily climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, the bookstore's warmth lingering on her skin. She lit her grandmother's candle, its wax pooling like memories, and opened her mother's journal. Ellen's handwriting filled the margins, notes on patients, strangers, lives touched in secret. The boy on North Street, lunch money stolen again. Left a coat on his porch tonight. He will make it, I know. Emily's eyes stung. She had continued her mother's work, but tonight, James's face, haunted, searching, stayed with her. What was he chasing? And why did it feel like he was chasing her? Outside, Charleston's oaks swayed, their Spanish moss catching the moonlight like ghosts of promises kept. Two worlds, one of polished glass and one of worn pages, were drawing closer, pulled by a single act of kindness that refused to stay silent. James Harper pushed open the door to Thompson's rare books, the brass bells chime cutting through the hum of Charleston's late afternoon. Sunlight spilled across the shelves, gilding the spines of ancient volumes and catching flecks of dust that danced like tiny stars. Emily Carter stood behind the counter, her hands steady as she wrapped a customer's purchase in brown paper, but her hazel eyes flickered with caution when they met his. 2 days had passed since his first visit, and the violet-scented note still burned in his pocket, a talisman against the suffocation of his curated life. He had no proof Emily was the author, yet her quiet presence drew him like a compass finding true north. "Back again?" Emily asked, her voice warm but measured, as if testing the air between them. She tied the package with twine, her fingers deft despite the faint tremor James did not notice. "I am looking for a book," he said, the lie half-formed. "Something about finding purpose. I am reevaluating things." The admission slipped out, raw and unpolished, surprising him. In his world, vulnerability was a liability, but here, in this sanctuary of stories, it felt like a key. Emily studied him, her gaze piercing yet kind, as if she saw the weight he carried. "Purpose is a tricky thing," she said, stepping from behind the counter. "Sometimes it is not about finding it, but remembering what you already know." She led him to a shelf of philosophy, pulling a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. "This might help." "It is about living true, even when the world pulls you elsewhere." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the book, a fleeting spark that made James's breath catch. He wanted to ask about the bracelet, to press her for answers, but her steady calm held him back. Instead, he shared a truth he had not voiced in years. "I built a company from nothing, but lately it feels like I am living someone else's dream. Every decision affects hundreds of people, and I am not sure I trust my own judgment anymore." Emily's expression softened, her guard lowering like a gate unlatched. "My mother used to say the heaviest choices are the ones we make for others." She was a nurse, always helping people who could not help themselves. I think she would have told you to listen to the part of you that is still yours, not the world's. Her words landed like a stone in James's chest, stirring memories of his mother, who died when he was 14, leaving him a letter about kindness that saved his family. He bought the book, lingering as Emily rang him up, her presence a quiet rebellion against the noise of his life with Victoria Lane. As he left, the bell's chime felt like a promise he would return. That evening, Charleston's Maritime Foundation Gala glittered under chandeliers at the Francis Marion Hotel. James stood beside Victoria, her white gown catching light like a beacon for the photographers circling them. Her smile was flawless, optimized for the 2.3 million followers awaiting her next post, but her grip on his arm was iron. "You have been distracted," she said, her voice low, venom cloaked in velvet. "Unexplained absences, fewer posts." "People are noticing, James. Our brand depends on consistency." James sipped his champagne, the bubbles sharp against his tongue. "Maybe I am tired of performing," he said, the words escaping before he could cage them. "This life, Victoria, it is not mine anymore." Her eyes narrowed, green and cold as jade. "Do not be ridiculous. People do not change, they get sidetracked." "You are not some poet in a bookstore, James. You are a CEO, my partner, Charleston's power couple. Do not forget what we have built." She adjusted her pose for a passing camera, her smile snapping back into place like a mask. James's jaw tightened. Victoria's world was a stage, and he was her co-star, not her equal. The violet note, Emily's words about purpose, echoed in his mind, a counterpoint to the gala's hollow sheen. He excused himself, stepping onto the balcony where Charleston's harbor sparkled under a crescent moon. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of a man he thought lost. A man who valued truth over image. Across town, Emily sat in her apartment above the bookstore, the glow of her grandmother's candle casting shadows on the walls. Her mother's journal lay open, Ellen's handwriting a lifeline to a purpose Emily feared she could not match. "The lonely ones need us most," Ellen had written. A note, a gesture, can remind them they are seen. Emily's own notes to strangers, left in coffee shops, libraries, hospital waiting rooms, carried that legacy, but tonight, her thoughts lingered on James. His haunted eyes, his halting confession, had cracked something open in her. She wanted to know his story, to understand the weight he carried, but fear coiled in her chest. His world, glass towers, tailored suits, a fiancé who radiated power, was a universe apart from hers. Their connection, fragile as a pressed flower, could not survive that divide. Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw his face, searching, as if she held a piece of him he needed to reclaim. She picked up her mother's fountain pen, its weight grounding her, and wrote a letter to no one, a habit that steadied her heart. To the man who seems sad behind his success. Your eyes carry a story the world cannot see. Do not let it steal the part of you that still dreams. She pressed a sprig of baby's breath into the page, sealed it, and tucked it into her journal. It would never be sent, but writing it felt like keeping a promise to her mother and to herself. Downstairs, Mr. Thompson locked the bookstore, his steps slow but purposeful. He had watched Emily with James, seen the spark neither acknowledged. At 67, he knew love when it hesitated at the threshold. His wife, Clara, had taught him that the quietest hearts held the deepest truths. "Ellen would be proud," he murmured to the empty store, the books seeming to nod in agreement. Outside, Charleston's ancient oaks stood sentinel, their Spanish moss swaying like curtains over a stage where two souls were beginning to see each other. But in Victoria's penthouse, a private investigator's report lay open, detailing James's visits to a bookstore on King Street, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always when a certain clerk was working. Victoria's manicured nails tapped the page, her mind already scripting a confrontation. The violet note had ignited a spark, but a storm was gathering, and Emily's quiet world was about to face its first test. The air in Thompson's rare books hung heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood, a quiet sanctuary disrupted by the sharp click of designer heels against aged floorboards. Emily Carter looked up from shelving a stack of poetry collections, her hazel eyes narrowing as Victoria Lane swept into the store like a storm dressed in white silk. The late afternoon sun caught Victoria's flawless ensemble, chosen to photograph perfectly under any light, but her emerald eyes burned with a fury that needed no filter. Customers paused, their browsing forgotten, sensing a confrontation that crackled like lightning about to strike. "You are the little distraction," Victoria said, her voice a blade wrapped in condescension, honed by years of dismissing those she deemed beneath her social media empire. She stopped a few feet from Emily, her posture commanding attention, as if the bookstore were a stage and she its star. "Let me explain something about men like James Harper that you clearly do not understand." Emily's hands stilled on a volume of Dickinson, her heart pounding but her face a mask of calm. She set the book down with deliberate care, her mother's lessons anchoring her. Kindness does not bend to cruelty. She met Victoria's gaze, saying nothing, her silence a shield stronger than any argument. The quiet dignity of her response only fueled Victoria's rage, trained as she was to expect cowering or defiance, not this unshakable grace. "Men like James get bored," Victoria continued, her voice rising, slicing through the store's hush. "They wander into places like this, charmed by quaint little projects like you, but they always return to their real world, empires, responsibilities, partners who understand success." She gestured at the shelves, her diamond bracelet flashing. "You see old books and think they are treasure, but this is just poverty dressed up as culture. James's life involves pressures you cannot imagine." Customers exchanged glances, their stillness amplifying the tension. A young woman clutched a novel, her eyes wide. An older man adjusted his glasses, leaning closer. This was no mere argument. It was class warfare disguised as romance, privilege attacking authenticity. Emily's fingers brushed the counter, grounding herself in the familiar grain of wood. She could feel the weight of Victoria's words, each one a stone meant to crush her, but her mother's voice whispered, "The loudest are often the loneliest." "You are right about one thing," Emily said at last, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of truth. "I do not understand your version of value, but I understand love, and love does not require a resume or a following. It requires two people brave enough to be real with each other." Victoria's composure cracked, her lips parting as if struck. She had expected weakness, not wisdom, and the bookstore's quiet power, its shelves, its stories, its keeper, unsettled her. Before she could retort, Mr. Thompson emerged from the back room, his 67 years carrying the authority of a man who had seen true character tested. His silver hair caught the light, and his eyes, sharp with the wisdom of loss, fixed on Victoria. "Miss," he said, his voice calm but unyielding, "Emily understands value better than anyone who needs to shout their worth to strangers online. You might consider what that says about your own." The words landed like a gavel, and Victoria's fury met an immovable force. She straightened, her heels clicking as she turned to the door, but not before hissing, "This is not over. James will remember who he belongs to." The bell chimed as she stormed out, her exit as theatrical as her entrance, leaving a wake of stunned silence. Emily exhaled, her hands trembling as she resumed shelving books, though her rhythm faltered. The customers returned to their browsing, but their glances lingered, filled with respect for the young woman who had faced a tempest without flinching. Mr. Thompson placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying. "Clara would have handled that just like you did," he said, his voice thick with pride. "Quiet strength, Emily. It is louder than any storm." She nodded, but Victoria's words echoed, sharp as thorns. Little distraction. Quaint project. They cut deeper than she wanted to admit, stirring fears she had buried since her mother's death, that she was too small, too ordinary, to matter in a world of glass towers and curated lives. James's visits, his searching eyes, had kindled a hope she now questioned. Could their connection survive the chasm between their worlds? Or was she fooling herself, chasing a fairy tale her mother's letters could not write? That evening, Emily sat at her desk, the glow of her grandmother's candle casting shadows across her mother's journal. She opened it to a page Ellen had written years ago. "The world will try to make you feel small, but your heart is a universe. Do not let them steal its stars." Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to believe her quiet acts, her notes, her kindness, her care for this bookstore were enough. But Victoria's venom had planted doubt, and James's absence since their last meeting felt like confirmation. She closed the journal, blowing out the candle, and climbed into bed, the weight of borrowed time pressing against her chest. Across town, James sat in his penthouse, the city's lights a glittering cage. Victoria had not mentioned her bookstore visit, but her silence was a weapon, her eyes tracking his every move at dinner. He held the violet note, its lavender scent fading, but its words as vivid as ever. Emily's voice from their last meeting. "Listen to the part of you that is still yours," haunted him, a lifeline he could not ignore. He had returned to the bookstore twice, each time buying a book, lingering longer than necessary, drawn to her quiet wisdom and the way she treated every customer like a cherished friend. But tonight, doubt gnawed at him. His engagement announcement loomed, a Charleston-style cover story orchestrated by Victoria's team, complete with a televised interview and a social media campaign. Every detail of their perfect love story was scripted, a performance he no longer believed in. He opened Meditations, finding a passage Emily had marked. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The words felt like a challenge, one he was not sure he could meet. Downstairs, Victoria scrolled through her investigator's latest report, her manicured nails tapping the screen. James's visits to the bookstore were no coincidence. The clerk, Emily Carter, was the thread unraveling her carefully woven narrative. Victoria's brand depended on James, their power couple image a cornerstone of her empire. She would not let a bookstore girl steal what she had built. A plan formed, sharp and cold, to remind James where he belonged. Outside, Charleston's oaks whispered secrets to the night, their Spanish moss swaying like specters of promises yet to be kept. Emily's world, fragile as a pressed flower, had withstood its first storm, but the winds were gathering, and the heart of the tempest was still to come. James Harper sat in the velvet chair of the Charleston-style magazine studio, the weight of his decision pressing against his ribs like a storm about to break. Overhead lights burned hot, illuminating Victoria Lane in $30,000 of imported silk, her engagement gown a cascade of hand-sewn beads designed to dazzle under the camera's gaze. She adjusted her pose for the 100th time, her emerald eyes flicking to James with a mix of expectation and warning. The photographer's voice cut through the hum of equipment. "James, closer to Victoria. Look more in love, please." But James's hands trembled, his tailored suit a costume for a role he could no longer play. The morning had begun with a fight, Victoria's voice sharp as she critiqued his detachment during the dress fitting. "This matters, James," she had said, her words a whip. "Our brand partnerships, our followers, they are investing in our love story. Can you at least pretend?" Her question had cracked something open, a truth he could no longer bury. Now, as she stood radiant before the mirrors, James saw not a fiancé but a director staging a scene he had never auditioned for. "What if it does not matter to me?" he said quietly, the words slipping out like a confession. The studio froze, the photographer's assistant pausing mid-step, the air thick with shock. Victoria's head snapped toward him, her perfect smile faltering. "Excuse me?" Her voice was ice, but beneath it, James heard panic, a crack in her curated world. "What if this is all a performance?" he continued, momentum carrying him past the point of retreat. "What if we are pretending to feel something that is not real, building an image around emotions that do not exist?" His voice grew stronger, each word a step toward freedom. "I am done living a lie, Victoria. I cannot marry you." The photographer lowered his camera, the crew exchanging stunned glances. Victoria's face drained of color, her hands clenching the silk of her gown. "You are having pre-wedding nerves," she said, her tone patronizing, as if explaining a trend to a novice. "This is normal, James. Everyone gets scared before a public commitment." "No," he said, standing, his voice steady with the clarity of truth. "Normal would be marrying someone who sees me, not a prop for her brand. Normal would be a life, not a social media empire." He turned to the crew, his decision crystallizing. "The shoot is off. I am sorry for the inconvenience." Victoria's mask slipped, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "If you walk away, you are throwing away everything, our brand, our future, your reputation. That bookstore girl filled your head with nonsense about love, but this is the real world. Success requires strategy, not fairy tales. James met her gaze, unyielding. She wants to be understood, not documented, and that is worth more than any empire. He left the studio, Victoria's furious shout echoing behind him, the weight of his choice both terrifying and liberating. By 9 that morning, James sat in the conference room of Harper Grace, cameras rolling for what was meant to be a celebration of his engagement. Rebecca Matthews, Charleston's top lifestyle journalist, leaned forward, her smile practiced. "Mr. Harper, our readers are dying to hear about your love story with Victoria Lane." James looked into the camera, seeing Emily Carter's face, her quiet strength, her hazel eyes holding truths he had forgotten. "That is why I need to be honest," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "There is no love story. There is a contract pretending to be romance, a performance masquerading as passion. I refuse to live that lie any longer." The journalist's eyes widened, her script useless. "Mr. Harper, are you saying Victoria is a remarkable woman who deserves someone who loves her for who she is, not what she represents?" he continued. "I am not that person. I am choosing truth over image, connection over contract, love that does not need a publicist." The room was silent, the crew stunned, Victoria watching from the green room as her world crumbled in real time, her phone exploding with notifications. James drove straight to Thompson's rare books, his hands shaking as he parked outside the familiar weathered door. The bell chimed as he entered, the scent of aged paper and polished wood wrapping around him like a home he had never known. Emily stood in the poetry section, organizing a shipment of books with her usual reverence, but her face was guarded, the warmth of their past meetings replaced by a careful distance. Victoria's visit had left its mark, and James sensed it in the way Emily's shoulders tensed when she saw him. "Emily," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had burned his bridges to reach her. "I need to show you something that might explain why we were meant to find each other." He pulled a small wooden box from his jacket, its surface worn smooth by decades of touch. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue, was a letter his mother had written 20 years ago, its handwriting delicate, flowing across cream stationery, the same elegant script as the note that returned his bracelet. "My mother died when I was 14, he said, his voice soft with memory. "Cancer took her in 6 months, but she left me this letter about a woman who helped our family when we had nothing." He handed it to Emily, watching her eyes widen as she recognized the handwriting, the paper, the pressed violet tucked into its folds. "Someone who left groceries on our porch when my father was too proud to ask for help. Someone who paid our bills anonymously, who knew a boy needed Christmas presents even when his parents could not afford them." Emily's breath caught, tears brimming as she traced the violet's fragile petals. "My mother," she whispered, the pieces falling into place. Ellen Carter's mysterious errands, her quiet satisfaction after helping a family in North Charleston, it was James's family. "She followed your story, you know, kept clippings of your success like you were family." James knelt before her, taking her hands, feeling electricity in their touch. "Your mother saved us, Emily. And you brought me back to the person she helped me become. I broke my engagement this morning on live television. My business might collapse, my reputation is likely ruined, but I am free. For the first time in years, I can breathe." Emily's fingers tightened around his, her tears falling freely. "And how does it feel?" she asked, her voice trembling with awe. "Like I have been holding my breath for 20 years and just remembered how to live," he said, his smile unburdened by calculation. The bookstore seemed to hold its breath, its shelves bearing witness to a moment that felt written in the stars. Mr. Thompson watched from the shadows, his eyes glistening, knowing Clara would have seen this as love's quiet triumph. Outside, Charleston's cobblestones gleamed under the midday sun, the city buzzing with news of James Harper's confession. Social media erupted, his interview trending across platforms, but James saw none of it. He stood with Emily, the letter between them a bridge across decades, their hearts poised on the edge of a truth too vast to name. The storm had broken, but its aftermath would test the fragile bond they had only begun to forge. The air in Thompson's rare books felt charged, as if the shelves themselves held their breath, witnessing a moment woven by fate across 2 decades. Emily Carter stood in the poetry section, her hands trembling as she clutched the letter James Harper had given her, its cream stationery and pressed violet a mirror to her mother's anonymous notes. The handwriting, Ellen Carter's elegant, flowing script, linked their lives in a way that made the world feel both vast and intimate, like a book whose pages had been written long before they met. James knelt before her, his blue eyes raw with revelation, his tailored suit rumpled from a morning that had shattered his carefully curated life. "Your mother saved my family," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "When my father lost his job, when we faced eviction, she was there. Groceries on our porch, bills paid in secret, Christmas presents for a boy who thought hope was gone. I was 14, Emily, and her kindness kept me believing I could be more." He touched the letter, its violet fragile under his fingers. "This note, her note, is why I recognized yours. You did not just return a bracelet, you returned me to myself." Emily's tears fell, tracing paths down her cheeks as memories surfaced like treasures long buried. She saw her mother's Tuesday evening errands, Ellen returning home with a quiet glow, humming softly as she pressed flowers into her letters. "She never told me," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "She kept clippings of your success, business journals, articles about Harper and Grace. She would say, 'Good hearts find their way.' I thought it was just her optimism, but it was you. She was so proud of you." James's breath caught, the weight of Ellen's belief settling into him. He had built an empire, but its foundation was not his ambition alone. It was the anonymous kindness of a woman who saw a boy's potential when the world did not. "Your last name," he said, realization dawning. "Harper. You are the boy from North Charleston, the one she worried about when bullies stole your lunch money, when your father drank to forget his failures." "And you are her daughter," James said, taking her hands, their warmth grounding him. "The one who inherited her heart, her wisdom, her courage to act without an audience. Emily, I broke my engagement today because of you. Not just because of the bracelet, but because you showed me what truth looks like. I want to build a life with you, one that honors your mother's legacy." Emily's heart raced, awe and fear colliding. The bookstore's shelves seemed to lean closer, their stories bearing witness to a connection that spanned generations. She wanted to say yes, to step into the future James offered, but doubt lingered, sharp as the memory of Victoria Lane's venom. "James, your world, towers, boardrooms, millions, it is not mine. I am just a clerk, a shadow. What if this is a moment, not a life?" He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, his eyes fierce with conviction. "My world was a cage until you opened the door. I do not care about the towers or the millions. I care about the way you sort books like they are sacred, the way you write letters to strangers who need hope, the way you make this store a home for anyone who walks through that door. That is the life I want." Emily's guard softened, her mother's journal flashing in her mind. "The heart is a universe." She stepped closer, her fingers tracing his jaw, feeling the tension of his morning's courage. "Then we write this together," she said, her voice steady. One page at a time, no audience, no performance, just us. Their embrace was a promise, soft but unyielding, the bookstore's quiet wrapping around them like a vow. Misty. Thompson emerged from the back room, his weathered face wet with tears. I knew, he said, his voice thick. The moment you walked in here, James, I saw a man finding home. Ellen's light brought you together, and Clara would have loved this story. The bell chimed, a customer entering, but Emily and James barely noticed, lost in the gravity of their shared past. They sat on the worn leather sofa near the poetry section, the letter open between them. Emily shared stories of her mother's secret missions, notes left in hospital rooms, groceries for single mothers, cards for veterans with no visitors. She believed kindness was a ripple, Emily said. One act could change a life, then another, until the world was better for it. James nodded, his own memories surfacing. When I got into college, a scholarship appeared, anonymous, just when I thought I would have to work instead. It was her, was it not? Emily's smile confirmed it, and he laughed, a sound of wonder. She followed me for 20 years, Emily, believing in me when I did not believe in myself. And now you are here, doing the same. The afternoon faded, sunlight slanting lower through the windows, gilding the bookstore in amber. James bought a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, its margins filled with Ellen's faded annotations, a gift from Emily's collection. Your mother quoted this to me once, he said, reading a line. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. That is what I feel with you. As he left, promising to return the next day, Emily felt a shift, as if the universe had aligned their paths with cosmic precision. She climbed to her apartment, lighting her grandmother's candle, its flame steady despite the weight of revelation. Opening her mother's journal, she wrote, Today I learned my mother's kindness reached further than I knew. The boy she saved is the man I love, and together we will carry her light. She pressed a violet into the page, sealing it with wax, her heart full of a hope she no longer feared. Across town, Charleston buzzed with the fallout of James's interview. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags, #HarperTruth, #AuthenticLove. His confession sparking debates about image versus reality. Victoria posted a statement about incompatible goals, but her followers saw through the spin, her pivot to a healing journey already in motion. James's phone vibrated with calls from board members, reporters, clients, but he silenced it, driving through the city's historic streets, the oaks and moss a silent chorus to his new beginning. In her penthouse, Victoria stared at her reflection, the mirrors reflecting a woman whose empire was fraying. Her investigator's report lay crumpled, useless now. She had underestimated Emily, mistaking her quiet for weakness, and James's rebellion for a phase. Her brand would survive, she was too skilled to fail, but the loss of control stung, a reminder of her own fragility beneath the curated mask. Back at the bookstore, Mr. Thompson locked the door, his steps lighter than they had been in years. He thought of Clara, how she would have seen this as love's quiet victory, a story written in margins and whispers. Charleston's cobblestones gleamed under the evening sky, the city holding its breath for what came next. Emily and James had found each other, their pasts threading together like a tapestry, but their future would demand courage to live as authentically as they had begun. Morning sun streamed through the expanded windows of Thompson's rare books, now home to the Ellen Carter Children's Literacy Center, its walls alive with murals of starry skies and mushroom-shaped reading nooks. Emily Carter arranged fresh violets in vases, their delicate petals a nod to her mother's legacy of quiet beauty. At 28, she stood taller, her hazel eyes bright with purpose, the weight of loneliness lifted by a love that needed no spotlight. James Harper, no longer the polished CEO but a man in rolled-up sleeves, helped her set up for the day's launch of the Unwritten series, a jewelry collection inspired by anonymous kindness. Charleston's ancient oaks outside swayed gently, their Spanish moss whispering blessings over a city transformed by two hearts choosing authenticity. The bookstore buzzed with quiet anticipation, volunteers from Emily's literacy program mingling with customers who had become friends. Mr. Thompson, now 70, moved among them, his silver hair catching the light as he shared stories of Clara and Ellen, two women whose love for stories had shaped this sanctuary. The wedding, held 6 months ago in this very store, had been a simple affair. 20 minutes of vows, Emily in her mother's altered dress, James's eyes never leaving hers, the Aurora bracelet on a mantle as a reminder of their journey's spark. The celebration had lasted until midnight, toasts honoring connection over wealth, love over image. Now, as guests arrived for the launch, Emily stood beside James, her simple violet ring glinting with meaning no diamond could match. The Unwritten series, designed by James, told stories of quiet strength. A violet ring with a pressed flower center, a morning mist necklace echoing Emily's gentle presence, a bookworm bracelet celebrating literary classics. Each piece came with an unsigned letter in Emily's elegant script, urging buyers to perform anonymous acts of kindness. Every purchase funded literacy programs in Charleston's underserved communities, turning beauty into opportunity, privilege into purpose. "Ready?" James asked, his hand finding hers, his blue eyes warm with a joy untainted by performance. His business had thrived under his authentic leadership, employees inspired by his honesty, clients respecting his courage. Victoria Lane's shadow had faded, her healing journey a footnote in Charleston's social media churn. Emily nodded, her smile steady. "For Mom, for us, for them." She gestured to a group of children from the literacy program, their parents working multiple jobs, their eyes wide as they clutched new books. She stepped to a small podium, her voice clear but soft, carrying the authority of lived truth. "The Unwritten series is about kindness that does not need a name. My mother taught me that the most beautiful acts need no audience, and James helped me see that love, like kindness, thrives in quiet moments. Thank you for joining us to make Charleston a place where every child can read, dream, and know they matter." The crowd applauded, not with the frenzy of a gala, but with the warmth of kindred spirits. Customers lined up to buy pieces, sharing their own stories of anonymous kindness. A teacher bought quiet courage earrings, revealing she left notes in library books for struggling students. A retiree chose hidden helper cufflinks, admitting he paid off layaway accounts at Christmas. Each story wove a community bound by the belief that love multiplies when given freely. James watched Emily read The Giving Tree to the children, her voice wrapping them in its gentle cadence. "And the tree was happy," she read, her eyes meeting his, and he understood happiness without an audience. Raw, real, complete. The collection sold out through word of mouth, not social media, its impact measured in lives touched, not likes. A young mother approached Emily, her voice shy. "I leave meals for families at my bakery, but I wondered if it mattered since no one knows. Does it?" Emily took her hands, her touch as steady as her mother's. "It matters because you do it. The parent who does not have to choose between groceries and rent feels your kindness, even without your name. The universe keeps perfect records." Later, a teenager named Amy handed Emily a letter, her father, David, beside her. "6 months ago, I found one of your notes in a library book," Amy said, her voice trembling. It said, "Your story is not over. The world needs you." I was struggling, but it helped me hold on. "Now I leave notes in lockers, coffee shops, anywhere someone might need hope." Emily's eyes glistened, her mother's ripple alive in a girl she had never met. As evening fell, the bookstore glowed with warmth unrelated to temperature, a haven where authentic connection felt natural. Reporters lingered, drawn by the story of Charleston's CEO who chose love over image. "What is your love story?" one asked Emily, her recorder poised. Emily smiled, her confidence rooted in truths no approval could shake. "The best stories do not need narration. They are lived quietly, felt deeply, by people brave enough to choose substance over spectacle." James added, his arm around her. "My wife taught me success is not what you achieve for applause. It is what you do when no one watches, who you love when the cameras are off." The crowd thinned, but guests lingered, reluctant to leave this space of shared grace. James and Emily stood by the mantel, the Aurora bracelet surrounded by thank you notes from literacy graduates, photos of scholarship recipients, pressed flowers from around the world, gifts from lives touched by their quiet revolution. Emily picked up a worn copy of Letters to a Young Poet, the book that first brought James to her, and wrote inside, "Thank you for seeing the invisible, for believing love needs no audience. E." It was her first signed note, a claim of her voice inspired by James's courage. James read it, adding below, "Thank you for teaching me the most precious things are lived, not posted, loved, not performed." J. Their eyes met, a silent vow to keep writing their story, unsigned, authentic, true. That night in their apartment above the store, Emily sat at her mother's antique desk, her journal open. "Today, Mom, your seeds flowered in ways you never imagined. The boy you saved uses his success to lift others, and I am his home as he is mine. Your kindness lives in every letter, every child who reads, every heart we touch." James read over her shoulder, adding in the margin, "The bravest thing is not success others admire, but love that needs no stage. You are my wealth, Emily." Outside, Charleston settled into evening, its oaks and moss dancing under a sky thick with stars. Mr. Thompson, now their partner, smiled from his apartment window, his phone buzzing with a text from a customer. "Your book recommendation changed my life. Left a soul-killing job to teach kids. Half the salary, twice the heart." He saw Emily and James bent over their journal, chronicling a revolution of quiet love. Tomorrow, Emily would read to nursing home residents, James would meet suppliers for fair trade practices, and together they would review scholarship applications, sending 20 students to college. The Aurora bracelet, once a symbol of performed love, now stood as a testament to truth's power. Emily wrote one final unsigned letter, sealed with a violet. "To anyone who needs to know they matter, your kindness creates ripples you may never see. Love bravely, give freely, and trust the universe sees every act performed when no one watches." Charleston's ancient streets glowed under moonlight, a city where two hearts had learned that life's most precious things could not be posted or purchased, only lived, loved, and quietly shared between souls brave enough to choose authenticity. A quiet maid slipped a bracelet into the CEO's car. Hours later, he called off his proposal.